Matthew chapter 10, verses 24 to 39. The student is not above the teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for students to be like their teachers, and servants like their masters. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebul, how much more the members of his household? So do not be afraid of them, for there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground, outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So do not be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. This is word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
The idea of risk is something most visitors to Australia are familiar with. The Latin word where we get risk means the challenge that a reef presents to a sailor. Will he make it through, or will the boat bottom out on the reef and see him being eaten by sharks? It is with sharks and swimming that risk has become a big part of Australia. Sharks are how the rest of the world sees us. It's not uncommon to hear of friends or relatives that arrive from overseas but are too scared to swim in the ocean because they believe they will be taken by a shark. Indeed, one of the most Googled things for those visiting from overseas is shark attacks in Australia. The animal is synonymous with this country, yet most Australians will swim at the beach. Why? Risk is the possibility of a bad thing. Swimming has a risk, but not a consequence of shark attack. It would be very different if you knew an attack would happen. Some actions have consequences. The thing about real life is when you do something stupid, it normally costs you. In movies, the heroes can make as many mistakes as they like. It does not matter what they do because everything works out in the end. They'll beat the bad guys and put things right and everything ends up cool. In real life, if you cross a busy road without looking, you get hit by a car. If you fall from a tree, you break some bones. Real life has consequences, and does not care about heroes and happy endings and the happily ever after. In real life, bad things happen. People die. Fights are lost. Evil often wins. That is why a lot of people will not even think about being a Christian. The consequences are just too great. You will be rejected, bullied, ridiculed, betrayed, persecuted, and maybe even the worst, killed for your faith. As John Wayne said, life is hard. It's harder if you're stupid. That means we should really ask the question of ourselves, why be a Christian? You could believe that is what Matthew is trying to get us to think in Matthew 10. In Jesus' own words to his disciples as he sends them out to proclaim the message in Matthew 10:7, the kingdom of heaven has come near. In Matthew 10:16 he says, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Hardly the sales pitch, even after he gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. As you know, a wolf versus a sheep will only end one way. It does not fare well for the sheep. That is the consequence of following Jesus and being a Christian. The world will eat us alive. Yes, Matthew 10 shows some of the consequences of following Jesus. However, Matthew 10 also shows the things that Jesus says about why we would be happy with the consequences. Moved by compassion when the crowds remind him of sheep without a shepherd, Jesus instructs his disciples in Matthew 9:38, ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. And then he organises a trainee mission for the 12 who are his inner circle. There are many things to learn from in Matthew 10, which, judging by the language, Jesus intends it to be a kind of forerunner of a lifelong mission for all Christians, for example, Matthew 10:18. But I want to focus on just one element in this mission of the disciples. That is the degree of conflict that Jesus expects in those he sends out and what that means. There are several consequences for true Christians following Jesus. My definition of a true Christian is one who is on a mission to live the life of the kingdom of God and to speak the message of this kingdom to people. The reason for this definition is simple. In Matthew so far, and in particular Matthew 10, those that follow Jesus are those that were lost from God and in life and are now found. And this being found is an inevitable confrontation of a new worldview, and therefore a true Christian must have compassion and reach out to those that are still lost. Here are consequences for being people on Jesus' mission. A quick review of Matthew 10. Matthew 10:11-14. Some entire communities will reject Jesus' followers. This has gone a step further, for entire countries now reject Jesus' followers. Matthew 10:17-19. In later years, although their witness will reach to the highest levels of government, those very governments will sometimes impose harsh sanctions. Christianity is against the law for over 200 million believers around the world. Matthew 10:21 and 35. The priorities of the gospel will split families so severely that some family members will betray other family members. Matthew 10:22-23. At its worst, persecution will follow Christian witness wherever they go. And in Matthew 10:28, persecution can end in martyrdom. Let's not pull punches here. I think Jesus meant that all these things could happen. It is common in many Islamic countries that if you convert to Christianity, your family will reject you and you will be tried for apostasy, abandoning your religion. In Sharia law courts, it will be official. If you are found with a Bible in North Korea, you will most likely be executed. If you were a pastor of a tribal church in Vietnam, you are definitely going to be tortured and put in prison. Anyone with a familiarity of history knows how frequently and frighteningly these predictions have come true. The fact that many in the developed world have for so long been largely exempt from the worst features of such persecutions has let us lower our guard. Even Christians may think that the hassle-free life is something that society owes us. But as the Judeo-Christian heritage of our society weakens, we may one day be caught up in realities that missionaries know, but that the rest of us somehow ignore. That the last century and a half, we have seen more converts and more martyrs than in the first 20 centuries since Jesus combined. So, how do we keep on keeping on? Or let me put it into the context of our thinking. Are these consequences worth it? What will keep us as Christians when John Wayne and all people and circumstances are screaming at us to stop following Jesus or else? Here's another review of Matthew 10. Matthew 10:24 and 25. The recognition that Jesus, our Master, was hated before us. God himself has subjected himself as Jesus to hatred. Matthew 10:26 and 27. Assurance that in the end justice will be done and will be seen to be done. Every wrong done to a Christian will be dealt with by God. Matthew 10:28. Recognition that a proper fear of God reduces fear of human beings. Matthew 10:29 to 31. Quiet confidence in the sovereignty of God, even in these circumstances. Matthew 10:40. Encouraging recognition that those who do receive us receive Christ and therefore receive God. And Matthew 10:41 and 42. Christ's own promise that the rewards of eternity cannot fail. You see, there is something crucial at stake here for those that are true Christians. This is the way Christians view things. Indeed, it is bound up with being a Christian. Matthew 10:38 and 39, Jesus says, "Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it." These are the directions to the workers. Lose your life for me, and you will find it. What this says to me is that I need the persecuted Christians more than they need me. I say this because I want to be a true Christian. I know there are consequences, but with the worldview that Jesus gives, it changes things from simply being risks to being actual consequences. The risk of being a Christian in Australia may be worth it, as it is a small risk to take for a great reward. However, would you say that any definite consequences of being a Christian would be worth the reward? We need to see the persecuted Christians in the world as people who treat following Jesus in this way. If we are to take seriously Matthew 10 and Jesus' directions to his workers, we should forget the risk and embrace the consequence. The worldview of those that reject Jesus and even the prayers of those that think they follow Jesus will always centre on how much those who suffer need those who do not. This is not what Jesus is saying in Matthew 10. Over 200 million believers in 52 countries face persecution for their faith every day. The level of suffering in restricted nations is simply unimaginable. People are beaten, imprisoned, harassed and killed for their faith in Christ. Yet Matthew 10 says that as a true Christian, you need the persecuted people who follow Jesus more than they need you. When you look at the persecuted Christians, you not only see the pain and the suffering, the oppression and injustice, you see faith and hope in the face of trials. You see joy and victory when everything else has been lost. We in Australia have so much to learn from those that face persecution. I do not want to downplay their needs because, yes, their needs are great, but we have so much to learn. There is so much distracting us from Jesus in Australia. We have such a comfortable lifestyle. A Christian's biggest concerns perhaps should not be where to go on holidays or what to do with that big tax refund. Our lives here are tied up with things that do not last. For believers in restricted nations, their lives are tied up in Jesus. They do not have any of the luxuries that we take for granted. All they have got is Jesus. They are swimming with sharks as Christians. It is not a risk for them. It is a consequence that they will be attacked. We need the persecuted Christians' help more than they need us. Because when we look at the example of the persecuted Christians, we get a glimpse of what it really means to follow Jesus. Our world will see Christianity as stupid, not worth the consequences. A true follower of Jesus will know that the consequences that inevitably come are worth it.